have to say, and going back to the Jewish joy, Jewish resilience, like all of the things that you guys preach about constantly, I do think that there is this resilience that I kept inside of me that really helped me to persevere. And I think more than anything, that perseverance is what got me to where I am today.
Hello, everyone. I'm Yasmino Hebsian. I'm here today with the incredible Shawna Wexler, who's a partner and the head of talent at Sugar 23. For those of you who don't know, I'm the founder and CEO of Our Campus United. Shawna, we're honored to have you. We really see you as a leader in shaping stories and voices that reach millions. So thank you for taking the time. For students who might not know your story yet, just to jump right in, how would you describe the work that you do, the path that brought you here, sort of your journey in this industry?
I grew up in Los Angeles. My parents are not in the business, but obviously growing up in LA, I had so many friends whose parents were, but I never understood what that meant. It was never coming from a place of the limelight and Hollywood, like written in the stars. It was more, oh, my friend's mom is a lawyer and she works with actors. And come to find out all these years later, she's like the biggest lawyer in all of Hollywood. But I always grew up with a curiosity about the business. I was a fan of the arts and never really realized that it was an option for me to work in the business. So growing up, I was not the best student, I have to say. I actually will say that loud and proud. I was just not disciplined. I struggled with ADHD. And school was never my thing. I was a dancer. I was in all of the musicals at my high school, Windward High School. It was a high school that was very celebrated for the arts, and I just loved feeling like I had a place to fit in there. But then when I went to college, it was so academic. And as I was going into my senior year in college, everyone's like, okay, well, what are you gonna do? What's your plan? This is your last year in college. You gotta start lining yourself up for your next thing. And the pressure was on. And I was just like a deer in headlights. And so I just resulted to, okay, well, both of my parents are lawyers, so I'm gonna go to law school. And that was my path. And I studied for the LSAT, and I studied and I studied, and it was just wild. And very, very randomly, I got an opportunity to go work at CAA. And I went and interviewed about 2 weeks before graduation. I had already applied and gotten into law school. And I interviewed, and my the person that I interviewed for, he was like, okay, well, name all of the networks in television. And I was like, Fox. I literally knew nothing about the business. And I don't know why, and I don't know how, but he decided to hire me. I took the job, and I got a million calls from people who knew that guy, who were like, are you sure you want to take this job? He's notoriously tough. And I just said, you know what? It's going to get my foot in the door. It's going to give me a little bit of a 411 on what this really is about. I'm going to take it and we'll see. And that was the start of now a 21-year long career.
Wow. So I know you were at CAA for about 10-ish years. What brought you to Sugar, and how was your experience at CAA?
So CAA is, and I'm talking about back then, and I'm not going to date myself too much, but this was 21 years ago. It was a very different time in the entertainment industry. It was before diversity and inclusion. It was before women had a seat at the table. And it was a fun place to work. Not to say that it isn't now. I don't know what it is as much now because I'm not within those halls. But when I started there, it was very small. There were 20 to 25 agents per department. It was very much like a fraternity, for better or for worse, where everybody hung out all the time. Your friends at work were your friends in your personal life, and everything kind of crossed over in between. And at the same time, if you really wanted to, you could put your ear to the ground and learn the business. If you were serious about it, there was a lot of opportunity. And I remember my whole first year working for that boss was so challenging. He was tough, and it's not uncommon, and everything that you do hear about the agencies at that time was true for me. I wasn't treated great. I was definitely belittled. I was definitely not treated as an equal. I was definitely threatened to be fired every other week. And that wasn't an environment that I was used to growing up in. My family had dinner parties where I sat at the dinner table with other adults and I could listen in and contribute to conversation. So it was a really big, rude eye-awakening moment to be at a company where I was like not even considered close to equal and had to earn the respect of everybody around me. So I did. It was very motivating for me because I had come from a place where I was respected as a peer, and my parents taught me how to respect others and how to speak appropriately with people who are your senior. And I was raised in an amazing family who taught me all these wonderful values. I was so determined to find and fight my way into that group of agents at CAA, and to the point where I was 21 years old and I loved what I was doing. I loved the culture of the company. I really felt like I could make something of myself there. And I had to go and fight my way into the infamous CAA mailroom, where basically they promote you into the mailroom and then you begin your journey to becoming an agent. And so I went to every single agent in that whole entire department, and I told them all of the reasons why they need to help promote me into the agency trainee program in the mailroom. And at 22 years old, I entered the mailroom and I worked my butt off for 3 years. And at 25 years old, I was promoted to agent at CAA, and I was one of the youngest agents at that time to ever be promoted. I worked at that company for 10 years of my life. I started there when I was 20, and I became an agent at 24, 25, and I loved that place. Like, I bled red is what they would say, because CAA, like, the color is red. After I got promoted, the company changed a lot. It got bigger, it got bought by a larger company and a huge investment firm. It became so much more corporate, and I really felt like I was losing that glimmer, that spice, that excitement that I had when I started there. And I just felt like it was even more challenging as a woman, let alone a young woman within those walls. Again, this was before Me Too. This was before women had a seat at the table. Not a lot of women were in positions of power, and I felt stuck. So around age 29, 30, I decided that it was time for a pivot. I was just like, I really am young enough now where I can take a bet on myself. I'm young enough now where I feel like I can own my own business. And I wasn't happy. I wasn't feeling fulfilled. And I think I could have easily stayed there. And honestly, sometimes I wonder if I would have stayed there, I could have been in a position of power, because ironically, a year after I left, Me Too happened. Everything happened where then women were pushed to the front of the line. So I decided to leave, and at that time it was the best decision for myself, and I wanted to go into management because I was a very nurturing type of agent in my skill set, and it just felt like the best natural next step. So I actually, in between CAA and Sugar, I stopped over at Brillstein Entertainment, which is one of the oldest and most respected management companies in the business, and I worked there for 8 years. I really just rolled my sleeves up and grew my business, and we had COVID. I got married during that time period. I had both of my kids during that time period. But then I hit that same fork in the road where I was like, I want more. I want more. Now that I have this career that I've been fighting for, now that I have this wonderful life at home with an amazing husband and 2 beautiful children, like, what's next? And I put it out in the universe in my mind, like manifested it. And within 2 months, Michael Sugar called me on the phone out of the blue. And I'd never met him before. And I always heard great things about him because a few of my friends had worked with him and adored him. And he called me and he offered me an opportunity that I just could not refuse. It was then when I really felt like I found myself in the happiest work environment that I've been in 20 years. And he also saw something in me that no one else has seen throughout the whole trajectory of my career, which is my passion and my motivation and my love for people and being a leader. And our values really were in line with each other. And here I am 3.5 years later.
Wow, what an inspiring story. I think that there are so many students out there who are really looking to break into the industry the way that you did, especially so young. And I wonder if you have any advice for those students, especially those who don't have any industry connections, which I know you mentioned is a big part of your story.
Yeah, it's interesting because now that I'm in this position, I run our internship program and I really try to mentor young women, especially who are wanting to come into the business. I do believe in cold calls. I think that if you are motivated, you will see the results of the fruits of your labor. A lot of people reach out to me on LinkedIn. A lot of people reach out and find my email and through a friend of a friend or from college alumni boards, and they reach out, and I really try my best to take the time to sit with people. I always tell everyone it only takes one person to believe in you to get your foot in the door. And I really pride myself, and a lot of people that I know, thank God, also pride themselves on helping to grow people's careers. My thing is get on LinkedIn, go through alumni programs, get yourself to Los Angeles or New York, reach out and befriend the HR folks at all of the agencies, management companies, studios, send them cookies, like go that extra step to show them that this is something that you're so passionate about. It does make a difference. Being relentless is an important part of this that you will carry with you in the entertainment industry for the duration of your career. The other thing is like there's a very slight line between being aggressive and assertive. Stay on the side of being assertive and pushy. Once you get over that hump to being aggressive, no one wants to be around you. So just really learn how to straddle that line is my biggest advice. And also just I'm here. Reach out to me, and if it's not me, I have lots of good connections and wonderful people who are wanting to mentor young, smart, hardworking college kids.
That's so great to hear. I think LinkedIn especially is such an awesome tool, and it's wonderful that students these days are able to utilize that and connect with incredible industry leaders like yourself. Another thing I wonder about is, in reflecting back on your career, is there a moment where things didn't go as planned, and sort of, in navigating that, how did you find your way forward?
Just going back to the mailroom at CAA, because I was so young and I was naive and was working hard, and I was still very motivated. But I remember going into the mailroom, and there were different stages of the mailroom before you got promoted to agent. And I remember very vividly sitting in the staff meetings. There was a huge staff meeting every month. And in those staff meetings, people would get promoted. They would make these huge announcements and people would get promoted and everyone would stand up and cheer. And I remember so distinctly when I worked there that all of my male friends were getting promoted like so quickly. And every one of those staff meetings, they would get promoted, even if they were only in the mailroom for like 3 months, 5 months, 6 months. I was working as an agent trainee for 3 years. And I remember saying to myself in one staff meeting, I was like, I hope it's going to be me. I hope it's going to be me. And yet again, I did not get that promotion. And I remember saying to myself, okay, well, maybe it's just not going to happen. And I remember going home and crying to my mom and dad and just saying, like, I've worked so hard. I do not understand how it's not my turn. And they were like, you deserve it. It's going to come. Just stay tough, stay focused. But that was one of the most trying times of my career, only because I just did not know what more I could be doing or doing anything differently. And I have to say, and going back to the Jewish joy, Jewish resilience, all of the things that you guys preach about constantly, I do think that there is this resilience that I kept inside of me that really helped me to persevere. And I think more than anything, that perseverance is what got me to where I am today. Nothing is going to go right or perfect in anyone's career, whether it's in entertainment or in any other field. But when shit hits the fan and you are able to look at yourself and know that you worked hard and that it will come and that you have to stay strong and focused, you're pulling from that generational fight. And that's what really kept me going.
It's so inspiring and so wonderful to hear. And as you so eloquently mentioned, Jewish joy and sort of celebrating our identities as Jews is a huge pillar of what we do here at Our Campus United, and especially through the OCU Chronicle. I would love to hear a little bit about what your experience as a Jewish woman has been in this industry, before October 7th. And of course, a lot has happened since October 7th, and I'm sure some things have changed, but would just love to kind of hear about that experience and what that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's such a weighted question, but let's start with pre-October 7th. As you guys know, for better or for worse, whether we get judged or not, a lot of Hollywood is Jewish. And so we would kind of all connect on that level, on the same values around the holidays. It was never at the forefront of my career per se. However, I've always been drawn to Jewish voices, but it was never something that was as greatly discussed as it is now. When it comes to post October 7th, it is a very intense and magnified piece to what I do on a day-to-day basis that proves to be quite challenging in some of its moments. October 7th happened and I had to run our staff meeting. And I started the staff meeting, and I was obviously very heavy-hearted, but I started the staff meeting as normal. And then I had to stop myself because, I was just grieving. I was so heartbroken, and I had to address what happened for our whole company, Jews and non-Jews alike. And I remember I was thinking about that leading up to this interview because I was reflecting on that week and the calls that we were making, all the executives that we were making to each other. And it makes me a little emotional just thinking about it, to one of my lawyer friends, Dean, to one of my agent friends, Jacob, and we were all calling to check on each other and make sure that we were okay and to offer support and guidance and care and love. There were tears. There were lots of tears and sobbing, and it was so intense. Now, in these years after October 7th, there has been a very difficult stance against Israel amongst a lot of our peers. And as I believe everyone is entitled to their opinions, I feel personally affected by some of those stances. And I have lost friendships and relationships and clients due to our differences, which I think is natural and fair and fine. And I will always welcome a conversation. I have clients who don't necessarily see things the way that I do, and that's okay. We all come from a different place. But I personally cannot stand behind and represent anyone who has that very, very particular view against Israel and against Jewish people. And I'm finding that anti-Semitism has been creeping up into these conversations so much more. It is very disappointing. It is very heartbreaking. And I am left sometimes at a loss for how to move forward. I think that it is important for me in my day-to-day to continue to give a voice to Jewish stories and to pay extra attention to them in this moment, especially. As a granddaughter of 4 Holocaust survivors, I also get very emotional when people are denying or saying anti-Semitic things that they don't really understand are anti-Semitic, and I always try to find a place in a very respectful way to let my opinion be heard. I actually this morning was on the phone with an agent, a very amazing, talented, big, important agent at one of the biggest agencies who was at the Emmys, and I asked him how he felt being in that room with Hannah Einbinder and what she said. He said that he wasn't shocked, that of course, he wasn't shocked that she used that moment to say what she said, but he was disappointed, as were a lot of people around him, that she didn't find that moment as an opportunity to unite and instead just divide further. I think we're always going to face the anti-Semitism. Now it's louder than ever post-October 7th, and I just think it's really important that we stick together and stay strong. But it definitely is way more a part of the conversation in the entertainment industry now more than ever.
Absolutely, and I think the way that you've navigated all of that, which I can only imagine has been really, really challenging and emotional, as you mentioned, is really inspiring to me and all of the students that are listening. And you mentioned that, you have had those difficult conversations with people that you disagree with. And I think that that's okay. And I wonder, after kind of going through that and navigating that, if you have any advice for students who are in a learning environment at universities across the world who, are interested in having those conversations, but want to have them in a positive and healthy way.
First of all, it takes a brave person to approach these types of conversations. So I think starting there is so important. Coming from a place of understanding, coming from a place of wanting to have an open conversation is also very important. Being educated on what the discussion is also very important. Listen, starting a conversation about anti-Semitism by saying I'm no historian is a great way to lead into having grace for facts and things like that. I think we all have to agree that going into these conversations, we might lose a friend. We might lose a colleague. We might lose the respect of a classmate. That's okay. And I think it's also okay for us to weigh the importance of what that looks like before we have the conversation. And in some cases, we might decide it's just not worth it for whatever reason, and that's okay too. It does not mean that we have failed our Jewish identity if we are not approaching people with this dialogue. Right now, we live in such a divided world where it's us against them and everything just feels like it's so packed full of conflict. We need to also take care of ourselves and give ourselves some grace and make decisions that are going to be in our best interest. As I always love for us Jews to stand up for ourselves in any and all situations, I also want to say that it's okay to walk away for your own mental health and say, I'm just not going to do this right now because there's nothing good that can come out of this situation.
Yeah, I think that's really important, especially in situations where students are trying to get jobs, they're navigating, peers and roommates and friends and professors. And I think that intentionality is really important. So I appreciate you sharing all of that. And I know we touched on this a little bit earlier, but at Our Campus United, a huge pillar of our work is centered around celebrating and fostering Jewish joy. And I can really see that, that's something that you love and care about. I'd love to ask, why Jewish joy is important to you, if you can pinpoint a reason, and how you celebrate it, what role Jewish joy plays in your day-to-day life, both personally and professionally.
I've always been proud to be Jewish. Again, as four of my grandparents were survivors of the Holocaust, I always knew what I have to carry forward. But when I had kids, my husband also grew up in Los Angeles. He went to Jewish school his entire life, from preschool to middle school to high school. And he was born a lot more Jewish than I was. Just celebrated Shabbat. He, went to services on the high holidays for like a million hours where I would just pop in. He observed the holidays in a lot more depth than I did. And when we had kids, I decided that I wanted to do Shabbat every Friday night and start that tradition. And then they started going to Jewish preschool, and we would have our friends over for Shabbat dinner. And they always would leave our house and call me the next day and just say, wow, the way that we sat around that table, the way that we sang the prayers, the way that the kids played and had time away from the TV and the movies, and everyone was off their phones for that night, just that night, left them with a feeling of joy. And so I like to bring joy into my home through my children, to be honest. As cheesy as that sounds, it's like given me an opportunity to redefine my own Judaism and find a community of people who are like-minded. And I think now more than ever, obviously, we need to find the Jewish joy. We need to stick together and have fun. I'm a part of an organization for third generation Holocaust survivors. It's called If You Heard What I Heard. And I've gotten really involved in this organization because they said to me, you will help us to find the Jewish joy through events that we can throw and parties and dinners and get-togethers. And we're actually hosting an event this weekend for everybody. And we have this great DJ and all these amazing Jewish chefs in LA. And bringing people together to celebrate our resilience is so important. Even when all of our cards are down, even when we feel like it's us against the world, we have accomplished so much in this world, in this lifetime, in these generations. And it's a gift and a pleasure and an honor to be able to pass that along. And our ancestors, my grandparents who are no longer here, they're looking at me to do that. So I really try to find myself as like a vessel to radiate that joy to everybody around me.
And you absolutely do. It's so beautiful to see the way that you integrate Jewish joy in your life in such a powerful way. I'll ask one last question before we finish this off. If you could send one message to Jewish students around the world, who've been intimidated, who feel anti-Semitism, who are trying to prioritize Jewish joy, but have a hard time doing that in these difficult spaces to navigate, what would that message be?
That you are not alone and that you should find your allies, because there are many of them, and to stick together and to persevere. Know that many people and generations have done it before, and you will do it yourself.
Thank you so much for that. Yeah, at OCU, we always say we've got your back. And I think we really both share that energy. And you're right, Jewish students and allies are not alone. Thank you so much for your voice, for taking the time to do this. I think this has been an incredibly inspiring conversation for me especially. And I'm really excited to share this with the OCU Chronicle and with the world. So thank you, Shawna. Really appreciate it.
It is my biggest pleasure. It is my biggest pleasure.